The Avatar Dining Club Mysteries by Huckleberry Hax. Episode 8. The Missed Appointment. A light dusting of snow covered the path on my walk from the car park to the 8th meeting of the Avatar Dining Club at La Barra Verde. These monthly meetings had become a social highlight for me, but on this occasion I was not especially looking forward to the meal. In the intervening weeks, the guest I had brought to the previous meeting, Deadly Number, an old school friend who I happened to know also in the Metaverse, had hooked up with one of the regular members of our group, Rainy September. Rainy was a woman I had taken a mild disliking to, right up to the point when she started showing an interest in Deadly. It dismays me frequently that my romantic inclinations are about as sophisticated as a 2-year-old who doesn't want to touch his carrots until the moment they are taken away from him. My brown study was interrupted by a snowball landing squarely across the left lapel of my overcoat. I looked up in annoyance, ready to unleash upon whatever nearby urchin had dared disturb my indulgent moment of self-pity the full extent of my verbal outrage, and spotted the youngest member of our dining club, Raw Concrete, grinning at me from across the road. "Cheer up, Leonard," he called out to me as he sauntered over. "It might never happen." Raw will never know how fortunate he is that I like him, since that particular salutation is one that I consider a well-aimed snowball, even one to the face, vastly preferable to. I resisted my natural urge to land him on his rear, and instead forced an unconvincing smile across my face. "Hello, Raw," I said. "Quite the turn-up, eh?" the virtual world builder remarked. "Rainy and Deadly. Who'd have thought?" To anyone with one or more eyes in their head, Rainy's advances on Deadly at our last meal had been blindingly obvious. "It feels like a breach of the club rules to me," I said stiffly. "We're not supposed to meet up with each other in world." "As I recall," he replied, "that was more of a recommendation than a hard and fast rule. In any case, it doesn't apply to guests, who by definition know at least one of us in there." "Except as I understand it," I said, "Rainy now wants Deadly to become a full member of the club." "Well, it turns out he only lives around the corner. I'm surprised you didn't know that, Leonard, what with him being your friend and everything." "I did know that," I cried. "I didn't announce it because I was following the no real-life information rule." "I wonder what Edward will say," Raw mused. "He's had to tell off Rainy once already about the real-world thing." He kicked up little sprays of snow as we walked. "I'm certain he'll be unhappy about it," I replied. "For one thing, where are we going to put the laptop for the virtual guest if all 8 seats are occupied?" "We're going to have to ask for a bigger table," Edwards declared. "Is that a yes?" asked Rainy, beaming. "Let's not be too hasty here," I commented. "Communities have to evolve, Leonard," our founder told me. "Nothing stays the same forever." "The restaurant might not be happy with us having a larger table," I pointed out. "It will be our pleasure, sir," our waiter, Enrico, told me. "That's really good of you," I told him quietly. "Could it be that you're jealous, Leonard?" Indigo Williams asked playfully. "Most certainly not," I declared, perhaps a little too forcefully. "I think it would be nice to have another member," Jennifer Bitt commented. "Plus, it enlarges the pool of guests we can invite." "My thoughts precisely," Edward agreed. "After Marianne's guest tonight, each of the original members will have brought someone to a meeting. Do you think Deadly might find someone for our meeting next month, Rainy?" "I'll ask him when I get home tonight," she replied. "We have an online game of Snakes and Ladders scheduled, Deadly was a board games maker in the virtual world. Is that a metaphor for something? Indigo asked, playfully. Meanwhile, Raw was helping Marianne Middlemarch to set up her laptop at the end of the table. We were meeting a couple of hours later than our usual time, since her guest lived on the east coast of the US and couldn't get home from work any earlier. The quietest member of our group, Marianne, had apologised profusely to us as we'd arrived for this departure from the norm. "My dear Marianne," Edward had told her reassuringly, "a metaversary gathering such as ours, with its global reach, cannot help but bump up against time zones from time to time." "I still find time zones hard to get my head around," Raw said, as he plugged in the very long network cable we'd been given permission to use. The restaurant had no Wi-Fi, a characteristic which a couple of years ago might have been seen as a minus, but which was now marketed as a feature. A big sign on the window declared it a Wi-Fi free zone. "I have a friend in India. Did you know they're 5.5 hours ahead of us? Who decides these things?" "I can go one weirder than that," I said. "New Zealand's Chatham Islands are 13 hours and 45 minutes ahead of us." Finally, the connection was made, and a middle-aged man with straw-coloured hair and a rather straggly-looking beard appeared on the laptop screen. Marianne took a deep breath and introduced 26 Bournemouth. "Actually," she added, blushing, 26 is my boyfriend, as of a week ago." "Oh!" cried Indigo, Jennifer and Edward, shortly followed by Rainey, who looked ever so slightly as though her thunder had been stolen. "We might as well rename ourselves the Avatar Dating Club," I mumbled quietly to Raw as he returned to his seat to my left. "Welcome, dear fellow," Edward announced. "I trust you have something to eat with us, and that Marianne has outlined the rules of our little get-togethers." "Sure thing, Edward," 26 replied, holding up a burger for us all to see. "I stopped for takeout on my way home, and no real-life information. Gotcha." 20 lives in New York," Marianne said excitedly. Then she caught Edward's stern look in her direction. "Oh, right. Sorry. It just popped out." "Definitely a pop-worthy fact," Indigo remarked, winking across the table at her. "Don't worry about it, Edward," 26 said from the laptop. "A New Yorker is never ashamed to be called a New Yorker." "Be that as it may," our white-haired host said gruffly, "I would greatly appreciate it if the RL revelations end there." We each introduced ourselves properly. "So how did you two meet?" Jennifer asked, leaning to one side slightly as Enrico placed a saltimbocca in front of her. "Oh, that was back in November," 26 said. "I'd not long broken up with my ex, and I decided it was time to get myself back out there. We met at a virtual Thanksgiving party." "Rebound," declared Raw. "Not a rebound," Marianne said quickly. "As I just told you, we only got together a week ago. We were friends first." "For a whole 6 weeks?" Indigo queried, deadpan. 6 weeks is a long time in the Metaverse." "Absolutely," Rainey said. "Like Deadly and I have been together now for just 3 weeks, but it feels like I've known him my entire life." "Whereas I have actually known him almost my entire life," I commented. "Oh yeah," she said. "He mentioned you two went to school together." "Leonard! Rainey!" Edward barked. He was starting to look genuinely cross. "I wanted to be absolutely certain that 20 was over Bardo before we started our relationship," Marianne said quickly. "How does 20 work as a nickname?" Raw asked, actually lifting his first slice of pizza before the descending plate had made physical contact with the table. "It's like a whole different name. It's like calling a Robert Jim." "You have a strange mind," Indigo told him. "Marianne was a saviour to me," 26 told us. "I was still a bit shell-shocked by the breakup. She really helped me to process it. You Brits are great listeners." "And what was so shocking about the breakup?" Rainey asked. "Just that it didn't make sense," he replied immediately, with unexpected passion. But we're done talking about that now, Marianne said sharply. You've moved on. Sounds like a mystery to me, Raw mused. Maybe we can solve it. You mean maybe you can come up with some highly improbable set of contrived possibilities, and then Edward can solve it? Indigo said to him. Raw stuck his tongue out at her. Not a mystery at all, Marianne told them. A misunderstanding, nothing more. She thought I was having an affair, 26 exclaimed, and I wasn't. Okay, muttered Marianne, so apparently we're not done talking about it. The more I tell her I wasn't seeing anyone behind her back, the more angry she gets with me for not being man enough to own up to it. The more you told her, Marianne corrected him. Past tense. Right, yes, 26 said. Told. Edward intervened. Why don't you tell us a bit about what you do in the virtual world, he suggested. Our guest waved his hand dismissively. I make shoes, he told us. Shoes? Said Rainey and Indigo in stereo. Wait, Jennifer said. Your Bournemouth shoes? Yep, he replied. The #1 brand, 10 years old in March. Oh, well done, Marianne, said Indigo. I think she had tears in her eyes. Is that good? Raw asked. It sure beats board games, she told him. Rainey cast a glare in her direction. Making shoes is his full-time job, Marianne practically squealed. He earns a fortune. Jennifer cleared her throat. I don't suppose you're looking for new bloggers? 26 rolled his eyes. Man, if I had a dime for every time someone asked me that. If anyone's getting a piece of that action, it's me, Marianne told her indignantly. Actually, 26 told us, Bardo is still my official blogger, for the time being. Rainey half choked on her wine at this news. What? Why? 26 avoided looking in Marianne's direction as he told us. Well, she, takes the best pictures of shoes. Shoes are difficult to photograph dramatically, Jennifer commented. Zoom in too much, and it's just a pair of shoes at the end of two legs. Zoom out too much, and all the attention ends up on the model. Right, Rainey said. Nothing to do with keeping that door ajar then. 26 blushed. I suppose there is an additional motive, he said, but it's not that. She thinks I had an affair, and I didn't. I don't want to do anything that plays into her version of events. You think that if you fired her, then she'd see that as evidence you wanted her out of your life, I said. Exactly, he cried. Finally, someone who gets it. Except, said Marianne firmly, we've agreed that sometimes you just have to accept that someone holds a negative view of you and let go of it and move on. Yeah, he muttered quietly, I suppose. In any case, it won't work, Indigo stated. People always interpret stuff to fit their version of events. She'll just decide you're only interested in her for the publicity she gets you. She's probably already decided that's the only reason you stayed with her in the first place. All you're going to do is build her resentment. Exactly, Marianne said. She glared at the screen as she added, Finally, someone who gets what I'm saying. Then what am I supposed to do to prove that she was wrong? Our guest asked us. What was it you did that gave her the impression you were seeing someone in the first place? Jennifer asked. But that's just it, he cried. I didn't do anything. There was a Halloween party we decided to go to together. I teleported over at the time we agreed, and she wasn't there. I waited for nearly an hour, and in the end I logged off, assuming something had happened in real life. Next day, when she finally messaged me, she went ballistic on me for standing her up. But I was there. She dumped you over that? Indigo asked incredulously. She sounds crazy. You should fire her ass and be glad you got away. My thoughts precisely, Marianne said. Let's change the subject. In fairness to Bardo, 26 continued, I had missed a couple of dates before that. How soon before that? Rainey asked. The week before that. You missed 3 dates in a week? I missed 2 dates, he clarified. The third I didn't miss. What were your excuses for the first two? The first one I plain forgot about. My shoemaking requires a lot of time. I can spend hours in one go, sometimes with messages turned off. I get so absorbed in my work I completely lose track of time. The second date I missed because something came up in real life. Rainey asked, and how did she respond to those missed dates? I heard Marianne sigh quietly beside me. Well, she wasn't happy about them, 26 replied. Bardo's a bit insecure and she knows women flirt with me sometimes because of my profile. I promised I'd make it up to her, and so I was especially careful to make sure I turned up on time for the Halloween party. If you don't mind me saying, my dear fellow, Edward said kindly, it's perhaps something of a stretch to say that Bardo ending the relationship makes no sense. Justified though it might not be, there is a clear logic of sorts to her perception of events. As Marianne says, sometimes we just have to chalk these things up to the unfairness of the universe and get on with being alive. Please don't get me wrong, 26 told him. The bit that's inexplicable to me isn't the paranoid narrative she's concocted. What I just don't get is how she's so certain I wasn't at the party when it was her who wasn't there. The system that tells you who's online at any given moment in the Metaverse is always glitching, Raw said. I often see people as offline when in fact they're in-world. Yeah, but that's just because they're hiding from you, Indigo told him. Ha ha, the young man retorted. Well, I say that she was there and the system was busted, telling each of you that the other was offline when you weren't. Is that too contrived for you? Makes sense to me, Rainey said. It doesn't make any sense to me at all, 26 said forcefully. Never mind what the system was saying. If she'd been there, I would have seen her there. Does she say she actually attended the party? Indigo asked. Perhaps she was at her home, waiting for you to come online. According to her, she was at the party at the exact same time that I was. Was it a busy event? Raw asked him. Oh yeah. It was held at one of the virtual world's top clubs. There was at least 40 or 50 people present. Then it's simple. She was there, but the lag created by that many people meant she didn't get rendered. She was there, but she was invisible to you, and you were invisible to her. Happens all the time. You're forgetting the list of people nearby, 26 countered. Do you really think it never crossed my mind that her avatar might not have rendered? It's not like I've never been to busy places before. I was checking that list every 5 minutes, just in case she was really there and I couldn't see her. Is it possible that she just went to a different event? Jennifer asked. There are lots of parties going on at Halloween. Maybe you thought she'd agreed to party A, and she thought you'd agreed to party B. We never discussed any other parties, he replied. In fact, the plan began with the club. I told her there was a party scheduled at Roxy's. The fact it was a Halloween party was an entirely secondary issue. Then maybe she's just lying, Indigo proposed. Maybe she wanted to dump you anyway, and to do it in a way that made out it was your fault. Maybe she wasn't there, but she assumed you wouldn't be there either because you'd missed the 2 previous dates. Or maybe she just wants to mess with your mind. If that's what she wanted to do, Marianne muttered, she for sure succeeded. There's no doubt at all that Bardo's temperamental and paranoid, 26 said, but I just don't think she's capable of something like that. I'm absolutely certain she believes she's right. How can that be possible? Edward cleared his throat. I wonder if I might be able to shed some light on this so that we can put this conversation to bed. I rather think poor Marianne has had enough of it. Indeed I have, she muttered. 26 looked momentarily shamefaced. I'm sorry, Marianne. Go right ahead, Edward. Nothing would please me more than to finally get some closure on this, though I don't know what you can possibly add that hasn't been thought of. You just wait and see, said Indigo. Well, it's just an idea, Edward said softly. Would I be right in thinking Bardo lives in Europe? He asked. Yes, 26 said. She's a Brit too. I didn't mention that, did I? How did you know? Oh, just a hunch, dear fellow. We were talking about time zones earlier, and I wondered if perhaps a confusion might have arisen from the two of you living by different clocks. If you're going to suggest that one of us turned up at the wrong time because we forgot we were in different time zones, 26 told him, I can assure you we were well accustomed to the hours difference between us. We'd been together for 5 months by the time of the party. Except that hours difference is not always constant, Edward pointed out. In the autumn, our clocks go back 1 week before yours, and in the spring your clocks go forward 2 weeks before ours. During these 3 weeks, the time zone difference between the UK and New York has decreased from 5 hours to just 4. It's entirely possible that a person from the UK might not be aware of this and turn up to an event at the time they think is the right time because that hour always equates to that time ordinarily, when in fact they are 60 minutes late, and their partner, by that time, has logged off. 26 stared at Edward, then threw his hands up. Why didn't I think of that? He cried. And I suppose you're going to tell us that Halloween last year fell during that autumn week, Indigo said, grinning. I'm afraid that it did, my dear, Edward replied. I'm afraid that it did. You solved it again, Edward, she declared. I merely cleared the way for a more productive conversation, our host replied. Now then, 26, why don't you entertain us with some surprising revelations about the virtual shoe industry? The Avatar Dining Club Mysteries was written and read by Huckleberry Hax. Music was by David H. Dean. For more of Huck's work, visit huckleberryhax.wordpress.com.